The research station Prometheus hung in the void like a metal flower, its habitat rings spinning slowly against the star-speckled darkness. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face to the observation deck's viewport, watching her 8-year-old daughter Maya chase holographic butterflies through the station's main corridor. The child's laughter echoed through the normally sterile halls, bringing warmth to a place designed purely for scientific discovery. "She's adapting well," observed Dr. Cathera, the Thraxian xenobiologist whose chitinous blue exoskeleton gleamed under the artificial lighting. Her compound eyes tracked Maya's movements with the precise calculation of a predator, though her intentions were purely academic. "Human children possess remarkable resilience compared to most species." Sarah nodded, the worry lines creased her forehead. Bringing Maya to this remote outpost had been a difficult decision. The divorce had been messy, and David's new position on Earth made custody arrangements nearly impossible across interstellar distances. The Prometheus mission studying the extinct Valerian civilization was too important to abandon, but Sarah couldn't bear leaving her daughter behind for 3 years. The psychological profile suggested minimal risk, added Commander Vextai, the station's Zolonian security chief. His reptilian features remained impassive, but his tail twitched with barely concealed anxiety. "Though I question the wisdom of bringing a human juvenile to this particular system." The Vega Terminus system held secrets that made even seasoned explorers nervous. Ancient Valerian ruins dotted the planets, filled with technology that defied understanding. The Valorians had vanished over 10,000 years ago, leaving behind only empty cities and haunting legends. Most disturbing were the stories shared in hushed tones across alien cantinas, tales of something vast and terrible that slumbered in the system's heart, waiting for unwary explorers to venture too deep. Maya had heard these whispers too, though the adults tried to shield her from such frightening stories. Children, however, possessed an uncanny ability to absorb information that adults preferred to keep hidden. During her exploration of the station's lower levels, Maya discovered forgotten data cores containing fragmentary recordings from the first Valerian archaeological expeditions. The holographic displays showed massive cavern systems beneath the fourth planet's surface, carved chambers that seemed to descend endlessly into the planet's molten core. Most intriguing were the references to something the Valorians called the Guardian of the Deep. Archaeological teams had found murals depicting a creature of impossible size and beauty, a dragon whose scales contained the light of distant stars, whose eyes held the wisdom of ages, and whose breath could reshape matter at the molecular level. The Valorians hadn't worshipped this being as a god, but rather seemed to regard it as a partner in some cosmic duty that transcended species boundaries. The academic consensus dismissed these depictions as mythology. Dragons existed in the folklore of dozens of species across the galaxy, but no credible evidence supported their actual existence. The Prometheus team treated the Valerian Guardian as an interesting cultural artifact, nothing more. Maya found these dismissals puzzling. Adults possessed vast knowledge about many things, but they sometimes lacked imagination. During her private explorations of the ancient data, Maya noticed patterns that the grown-ups seemed to miss. The Valerian writings described the Guardian not as a mythical creature, but as a living being with specific habits, preferences, and emotional responses. They wrote about feeding it crystallized starlight, about conversations that lasted for centuries, about a friendship that sustained both species through cosmic disasters. 2 weeks into their mission, long-range sensors detected energy signatures from the fourth planet's deep caverns. The readings defied explanation: massive bioelectrical fields that pulsed with the rhythm of a heartbeat, thermal emissions that suggested a living creature of unprecedented size, and, most puzzling of all, brainwave patterns that indicated not just consciousness, but intelligence that dwarfed even the most advanced AI systems. The discovery sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Emergency protocols demanded immediate evacuation until military forces could assess the threat, but scientific curiosity proved stronger than caution. Against direct orders from the Galactic Council, the Prometheus team decided to investigate. Maya watched the preparations with fascination. The adults bustled about with nervous energy, checking and rechecking their equipment. Dr. Cathera's compound eyes darted constantly between her sensor displays, while Commander Vextai ordered additional security protocols that seemed designed more to comfort the crew than provide actual protection against something capable of generating energy readings visible from orbit. "Can I come with you?" Maya asked her mother during the final equipment check. "Absolutely not," Sarah replied without hesitation. "You'll stay here with Dr. Hendricks and the support staff. This is too dangerous for civilians, especially children." Maya accepted this decision with the philosophical resignation that children develop when constantly excluded from adult adventures. She would remain on the station, attend her online classes, and wait for the grown-ups to return with their scientific discoveries. However, Maya-chan possessed her parents' stubborn curiosity and her grandfather's talent for creative problem-solving. That evening, after the expedition team departed for the planet's surface, Maya began implementing a plan she'd been developing since first hearing about the Guardian. The station's shuttle bay contains several small exploration pods designed for short-range reconnaissance. These vessels required minimal piloting skills and possessed automated safety systems that could return them to base if their operators became incapacitated. Maya had been studying the shuttle operation manuals with the same intensity she applied to fairy tales. The technical specifications seemed as fantastical as any fantasy story, but, unlike dragons and magic kingdoms, these machines actually existed and could be operated by someone with sufficient determination. Dr. Hendricks, the station's chief medical officer, possessed a kind heart but lacked the suspicious nature needed to monitor a resourceful 8-year-old. Maya had observed his routines carefully, noting that he typically spent his evening hours in the medical bay updating patient files while listening to classical earth music. His dedication to his work made him an ideal guardian for a quiet, obedient child who simply wanted to read in her quarters. Maya waited until the station's night cycle began, then made her move. She'd practiced the route dozens of times, memorizing every corridor and ventilation shaft between her quarters and the shuttle bay. The small exploration pod designated Sierra 7 sat in the corner of the bay, its systems powered down but accessible to anyone with basic station authorization. Getting into the pod proved easier than expected. Maya's small size allowed her to slip through the partially open boarding hatch, and her months aboard the station had taught her to move quietly through metal corridors. The pod's interior felt enormous compared to her bedroom, filled with displays and controls that hummed with barely contained energy. The automated startup sequence activated with her touch, recognizing her genetic signature as an authorized station resident. Maya had memorized the destination coordinates from her mother's mission briefings, the main Valerian archaeological site where the expedition team planned to begin their investigation of the Guardian. Destination confirmed, the pod's AI announced in its melodious synthesized voice. Estimated travel time, 47 minutes. Please confirm passenger authorization for solo flight operations. Authorization Maya-chan, special research mission, she replied, hoping the AI would accept her carefully practiced official tone. Authorization accepted. Beginning automated departure sequence. Please secure yourself for acceleration. The pod lifted smoothly from the shuttle bay floor, its inertial dampeners making the motion feel like floating in water. Maya pressed her face to the viewport as they emerged from the station's docking bay, watching the starfield wheel around them as the pod oriented itself toward the fourth planet. Space looked different when you were actually traveling through it rather than observing from a stationary platform. The stars seemed closer somehow, their light more intense and immediate. The fourth planet grew from a brown dot to a world of rust-colored continents and silver seas, its surface marked by the geometric patterns of ancient Valerian cities. The pod's descent through the atmosphere felt like riding inside a meteor. Friction heated the hull until it glowed cherry red, but the environmental systems maintained perfect internal conditions. Maya felt no fear during the descent, only excitement at finally participating in a real adventure instead of watching from the sidelines. The archaeological site appeared as a cluster of prefabricated shelters surrounding a massive excavation. The expedition team's vehicles sat parked in neat rows, their hulls reflecting the planet's pale orange sunlight. Maya guided the pod to a landing site several kilometers away, hidden behind rock formations that would conceal it from casual observation. The planet's gravity felt lighter than the station's artificial field, making each step feel like a small bounce. The thin atmosphere required her emergency suit's supplemental oxygen, but the temperature fell within comfortable ranges. Maya had studied the survey reports extensively and knew that this world posed no immediate environmental threats to properly equipped humans. The walk to the excavation site took nearly an hour across terrain that alternated between smooth stone plains and jumbled boulder fields. Maya's small size actually proved advantageous here, allowing her to squeeze through gaps and scramble over obstacles that would have challenged adult explorers. The Valerian ruins rose from the planet's surface like the ribs of some vast buried creature. Towers and arches stretched toward the sky in impossible configurations that seemed to defy gravity and structural engineering principles. The excavation had revealed chambers and corridors that descended deep into the planet's crust, their walls covered with intricate murals that told the story of a civilization that had achieved harmony between technology and art. Maya found the entrance to the deep chambers easily enough. Her mother's team had established clear navigation markers and lighting systems throughout the upper levels. The descent into the planet's depths felt like traveling through the pages of her favorite adventure books, each level revealing new wonders that exceeded her imagination. The murals became more elaborate as she descended, depicting scenes of Valerian life that included the massive dragon-like creature they called the Guardian. These images showed not a monster to be feared, but a friend and partner who shared in their daily activities. The Guardian appeared in scenes of construction projects where its breath helped forge materials, in educational settings where young Valorians learned from its ancient wisdom, and in ceremonial gatherings where both species celebrated their unique partnership. Hours passed as Maya descended through level after level of the ancient complex. The lighting systems grew dimmer in the deeper chambers, requiring her suit's supplemental illumination to navigate safely. The walls here displayed older murals that seemed to tell a different story, one of cosmic threats that required the Guardian's protection, of battles fought in the spaces between stars, of sacrifices made to preserve life throughout the galaxy. The final chamber opened into a vast cavern that defied comprehension. Maya's suit lights barely illuminated the nearest walls, but thermal sensors revealed a space large enough to contain entire cities. The air here felt different somehow, charged with energy that made her skin tingle and her hair stand on end. At the chamber's center, something massive stirred in the darkness. Maya's breath caught as she realized she was looking at living tissue, scales the size of buildings that reflected her lights like mirrors, revealing glimpses of a creature whose true dimensions exceeded measurement. The Guardian of the Deep was no myth or ancient legend. It was real, it was alive, and it was waking up. The dragon's first movement sent tremors through the cavern floor. Its head rose from centuries of slumber, eyes opening to reveal orbs of liquid starlight that bathed the chamber in gentle radiance. Each eye was larger than Maya's entire body, yet they focused on her with unmistakable intelligence and what seemed almost like curiosity. Maya stood frozen at the chamber's entrance, her mind struggling to process the reality of encountering a living dragon. Every rational thought told her to run, to activate her emergency beacon and summon the adults who possessed weapons and protective equipment. But something deeper than logic kept her rooted in place, a sense that this moment represented a crossroads that would define not just her own fate, but the future of multiple species. The dragon's massive head descended slowly, moving with careful precision that spoke of vast intelligence and self-control. Its breath washed over Maya like a warm summer breeze, carrying scents of ozone and starlight that seemed to awaken genetic memories of humanity's earliest dreams of flight and freedom. When the dragon's enormous eye came to rest just meters from where Maya stood, she saw herself reflected in its surface like a tiny figure in an infinite mirror. But, more than that, she sensed something that the adults with all their scientific instruments and theoretical knowledge had missed. The Guardian of the Deep was lonely. After 10,000 years of solitary vigil, it had awakened to find itself alone in a universe that had forgotten its purpose and its pain. Maya Chen took a step forward into the starlight of the dragon's gaze, beginning a friendship that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of courage, compassion, and the bonds that transcend species boundaries. The dragon's massive eye blinked once, slowly, like a star dimming and brightening in the cosmic void. Maya felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but she forced herself to remain still. Something about the creature's gaze felt familiar, like looking into the eyes of her grandmother's old cat who had always seemed to understand secrets that humans couldn't grasp. "Hello," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible in the vast chamber. The dragon's response came not as words, but as a vibration that seemed to resonate through her bones. The sound was deeper than thunder, gentler than a lullaby, and somehow conveyed more meaning than any language Maya had ever heard. She understood, without knowing how, that the dragon was greeting her in return. Above ground, chaos erupted in the archaeological camp as Dr. Sarah Chen discovered her daughter's empty quarters. The expedition team had returned from their preliminary survey of the upper chambers to find Maya missing and Sierra 7's automated flight log showing an unauthorized departure to the planet's surface. How does an 8-year-old child steal a shuttle and navigate through planetary atmosphere? Commander Vextai demanded, his reptilian features flushed with embarrassment and fear. Our security protocols were designed by the finest minds in the Galactic Council. Dr. Cathera's compound eyes whirred as she processed multiple data streams simultaneously. Human juveniles possess greater cognitive flexibility than most species. They can adapt to complex systems without the mental barriers that limit adult learning. Still, this should have been impossible. Sarah Chen felt her world collapsing around her. Bringing Maya to this remote system had been a calculated risk, but she'd never imagined her daughter would attempt something so reckless. The planet's surface contained countless hazards, unstable geological formations, atmospheric anomalies, and radiation pockets that could prove fatal to unprotected humans. "We need to activate the emergency beacon network," Sarah declared. "Every sensor array in the system should be scanning for her life signs." "Already in progress," Vextai replied, his clawed fingers dancing across multiple control surfaces. "But the planet's mineral composition interferes with our sensors. We're detecting dozens of human-sized heat signatures, but most are geological anomalies." Deep beneath the planet's surface, Maya took another careful step toward the dragon. The creature's head remained perfectly still, watching her approach with what seemed like amused patience. Its scales caught and reflected her suit lights, creating patterns of brilliance that shifted and flowed like liquid starlight. Maya had read countless books about dragons, but none had prepared her for the reality of standing in their presence. This creature radiated intelligence and power that made her feel like an ant approaching a mountain. Yet somehow, she felt no fear. The dragon's enormous eye held warmth and curiosity that reminded her of her favorite teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who always listened to student questions with genuine interest. "You're not scary at all," Maya said, reaching out tentatively toward the dragon's snout. "Everyone thinks you're a monster, but you're not, are you?" The dragon's nostril, larger than Maya's bedroom window, expelled a gentle puff of air that ruffled her hair. The breath carried the scent of star metal and ozone, but also something softer, like the smell of rain on summer evenings or her mother's perfume on special occasions. Maya's gloved hand touched the dragon's scales, and the contact sent electricity shooting through her nervous system. Not painful electricity, but something warm and alive that seemed to connect her consciousness directly to the ancient creature's mind. Images flashed through her thoughts, not her own memories, but the dragon's experiences across millennia of existence. She saw the birth of stars, watched planets form from cosmic dust, witnessed civilizations rise and fall like waves on an endless shore. The dragon had been guardian and friend to species whose names were forgotten, protector of worlds whose light had long since faded from the sky. For 10,000 years, it had waited in this chamber, maintaining vigilant watch against threats that slumbered in the dark spaces between galaxies. The Valorians had been its last true companions. Together, they had built a civilization that balanced technological advancement with respect for the natural order. When the ancient enemy had stirred in the cosmic deep, the Valorians had chosen to sacrifice themselves to strengthen the barriers that kept darkness at bay. They had asked their dragon friend to continue the watch, promising that someday new allies would come to share the burden. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as she experienced the dragon's loneliness across centuries of solitary vigil. No creature should endure such isolation, especially one capable of such deep friendship and love. "I'm sorry you've been alone so long," she whispered, pressing her forehead against the warm scales. "But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." The dragon's response came as a low harmonic that vibrated through the chamber walls. Maya didn't need translation to understand its meaning: gratitude, wonder, and the tentative beginning of hope after endless years of despair. On the surface, the expedition team's emergency protocols kicked into full operation. Sarachan suited up for immediate deployment to the archaeological site, while Dr. Kethara prepared atmospheric scanning drones to search the surrounding terrain. Commander Vextai established communication links with the nearest Galactic Council patrol vessels, though the closest military response was still 3 days away. "We're tracking her emergency beacon," reported Dr. Martinez, the team's chief engineer. "Signal strength indicates she's descended into the deep chambers beneath the main excavation site." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. The preliminary surveys had detected massive energy readings from those depths, power signatures that suggested something enormous and potentially dangerous. The expedition team had planned weeks of careful preparation before attempting to explore those areas. "Prep the heavy exploration gear," she ordered. "If Maya's down there, we're going after her." Dr. Chen, Vextai interjected, his voice carefully controlled. "Our sensors are detecting additional activity in those chambers. The energy readings are spiking beyond our measurement capabilities. Something large is moving down there." Far below, Maya had settled cross-legged on the chamber floor beside the dragon's massive head. The creature had lowered itself to her level, bringing one enormous eye close enough that Maya could see her reflection in its starlight depths. They communicated without words, sharing thoughts and emotions through the connection established by their physical contact. The dragon's name, Maya learned, was something that couldn't be pronounced by human vocal cords, a harmonic sequence that described the sound of stellar winds through cosmic dust clouds. She decided to call it Cosmos, which seemed to please the ancient being. Cosmos shared fragments of its memories, showing Maya visions of the galaxy as it had existed millennia ago. She saw worlds of impossible beauty where crystal forests sang in harmony with stellar radiation, where oceans of liquid light supported ecosystems that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The universe had once been a much more magical place, filled with species that understood the deep connections between consciousness and cosmic forces. The darkness that the Valorians and Cosmos fought against came from outside the galaxy entirely, entities of pure entropy that sought to reduce all existence to uniform silence. They had been contained, barely, but their prison required constant maintenance. Cosmos had been fulfilling that duty alone since the Valorian sacrifice, growing weaker with each passing century as the isolation wore away at its spirit. "Why don't the other species help?" Maya asked, stroking the warm scales near the dragon's eye. Cosmos projected images that explained the current galaxy's condition. The younger species that had risen after the Valorians' fall possessed advanced technology but lacked the spiritual development necessary to perceive cosmic-level threats. They saw the universe as a collection of physical objects following mathematical laws, missing the deeper reality where consciousness and matter interacted through forces that transcended scientific understanding. Maya nodded thoughtfully. Adults often became so focused on complicated explanations that they missed simple truths. Her teacher Mrs. Rodriguez had explained this phenomenon during a lesson about how ancient peoples understood astronomy better than modern city dwellers who never saw the stars clearly through light pollution. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the chamber's entrance passages. Maya looked up to see lights dancing across the distant walls as the rescue team descended through the ancient corridors. Cosmos's massive head lifted slightly, its attention turning toward the new arrivals. "It's okay," Maya assured the dragon, maintaining her physical contact to sustain their mental connection. "Those are my friends. Well, my mom and her friends. They're probably worried about me." Dr. Sarah Chen emerged into the chamber first, her powerful suit lights blazing like miniature suns in the darkness. Behind her came Dr. Kethera, Commander Vextai, and 3 other expedition members, all heavily armed and equipped for potential combat with unknown threats. The sight that greeted them defied every assumption they'd made about the situation. Instead of finding Maya cowering in terror from some monstrous creature, they discovered her sitting peacefully beside the largest living being any of them had ever encountered. The dragon's eye tracked their movements with obvious intelligence, but showed no signs of aggression. "Maya!" Sarah called out, her voice sharp with relief and fear. "Get away from that thing. Come here right now." "It's okay, Mom," Maya replied, not moving from her position. "This is Cosmos. It's been waiting here alone for thousands of years, protecting the galaxy from bad things. It's not dangerous, it's lonely." Commander Vextai raised his plasma rifle, targeting systems locking onto the dragon's head. "Dr. Chen, call your daughter away from that creature immediately. We need to establish a safe perimeter before." Cosmos's response to the perceived threat came as a low growl that shook dust from the chamber ceiling. The dragon's neck extended upward, rising to its full height as energy began to gather between its massive jaws. The temperature in the chamber spiked as stellar fire prepared to incinerate anything that threatened the small human who had shown it the first kindness it had experienced in millennia. "No!" Maya jumped to her feet, placing herself between the rescue team and Cosmos. "Don't point weapons at my friend. It won't hurt anyone unless you try to hurt me first." Dr. Kethera's scientific training overcame her fear as she realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Her sensors detected the energy buildup in the dragon's respiratory system, power levels sufficient to vaporize their entire team in seconds. Yet the creature was showing remarkable restraint, clearly trying to avoid harming the humans except in direct defense of the child. "Lower your weapons," she ordered, her compound eyes fixed on the dragon's display of controlled power. "The creature is demonstrating protective behavior toward Maya. Aggressive actions on our part will only escalate the threat level." Vextai reluctantly complied, though his grip remained tight on his rifle. "How do we extract the child without triggering a hostile response?" Maya turned back to Cosmos, placing both hands on the dragon's snout. Through their connection, she shared images of her mother's love and worry, explaining that the other humans meant no harm despite their fearful reactions. Cosmos's massive eye blinked slowly as it processed this information, then, the stellar fire faded from its throat. "Mom," Maya called out, "you need to come meet Cosmos properly." But, leave the scary weapons behind. Dragons are very polite, but they don't like it when people are rude to their friends. Sarah Chen faced an impossible decision. Every parental instinct screamed at her to grab Maya and run from the enormous predator that could kill them all without effort. But, her daughter's calm confidence suggested a situation far more complex than a simple rescue mission. Dr. Kethara stepped forward, removing her sidearm and placing it carefully on the ground. "I'm going to approach slowly and make contact with the child," she announced. "My species has protocols for first contact with unknown intelligences." She walked across the chamber floor with measured steps, her compound eyes never leaving the dragon's face. Cosmos watched her approach but remained relaxed, apparently trusting Maya's assessment that these newcomers posed no real threat. "Hello, Maya," Dr. Kethara said softly as she drew near. "Can you tell me about your new friend?" Maya's face lit up with excitement. "Oh, Dr. Kethara, Cosmos is amazing. It's been protecting our whole galaxy from terrible monsters that live in the dark between stars. The Valorians were its friends, but they had to sacrifice themselves to help build a prison for the bad things. Cosmos has been guarding the prison all alone for 10,000 years." The Thraxian scientist felt her scientific worldview shifting as Maya's words triggered connections between previously unexplained phenomena. The energy signatures they detected weren't random, they were part of some vast defensive system that required constant maintenance. The Valorians hadn't simply vanished, they had died heroically to preserve galactic civilization. Cosmos lowered its head toward Dr. Kethara, extending the same tentative friendship it had offered Maya. The alien scientist hesitantly reached out to touch the dragon's scales, gasping as the contact opened her consciousness to visions that redefined her understanding of cosmic history. Behind them, Sarah Chen watched her daughter orchestrate first contact between humanity and a creature that could reshape their understanding of existence itself. Maya had accomplished something that trained diplomats and military specialists couldn't have managed. She had made a friend. The chamber filled with the sound of Cosmos's contented humming as it experienced the simple joy of no longer being alone in its cosmic vigil. Word of Maya's unprecedented contact with the dragon spread through Galactic Council channels like wildfire through dry stellar matter. Within hours of Dr. Kethara's initial report, emergency sessions convened on every major world from the core systems to the outer rim colonies. The discovery of a living dragon, especially one guarding cosmic-level threats, represented either the greatest opportunity or the greatest danger in recorded galactic history. Admiral the Rex of the Zolonian Defense Fleet reviewed the expedition team's recordings with growing unease. His reptilian features remained impassive, but his tail lashed with nervous energy as he watched 8-year-old Maya Chen sit calmly beside a creature capable of incinerating entire battle fleets. "The child appears to have established some form of telepathic link with the entity," reported Dr. Vexenale, the Council's chief xenobiologist. Her crystalline form chimed softly as she processed multiple data streams. "Our analysis suggests the dragon possesses intelligence levels that exceed our measurement capabilities." "Intelligence isn't the issue," Admiral the Rex replied grimly. "The energy readings from this creature indicate destructive potential equivalent to a stellar converter weapon. A single being with that much power, regardless of its apparent friendliness, represents an existential threat to galactic security." Chancellor Mordun of the Andromedan Trade Federation shifted uneasily in his hoverchair. The reports mention this creature serving as some kind of guardian against external threats. "Perhaps we should consider diplomatic overtures rather than military containment." "Diplomatic overtures through an 8-year-old human child?" Admiral Therex's voice dripped with skepticism. "The Council has trained xenodiplomats with centuries of experience in first contact protocols. We cannot allow critical interspecies relations to depend on the whims of a juvenile who thinks she's made a pet dragon." On the Prometheus research station, Maya's impromptu friendship with Cosmos had created logistical challenges that no one had anticipated. The expedition team found themselves hosting what amounted to the first dragon diplomatic mission in galactic history, with an elementary school student serving as primary translator and cultural liaison. Maya had insisted on returning to the chamber daily to visit her new friend. Each session revealed new aspects of Cosmos's cosmic perspective and the hidden history of galactic civilization. The dragon shared memories of ancient wars fought across multiple dimensions, of species that had transcended physical existence, and of the delicate balance that kept chaos from consuming the ordered universe. Dr. Sarah Chen watched her daughter's transformation with a mixture of pride and terror. Maya had always been precocious, but her interactions with Cosmos were developing capabilities that seemed almost supernatural. The child now spoke casually about stellar mechanics, dimensional physics, and cosmic threats that challenged the understanding of seasoned scientists. The prison isn't working as well as it should, Maya explained during one of their briefing sessions. Cosmos says the barriers are getting weaker because no one has been helping maintain them. The Valorians used to share the work, but now Cosmos has to do everything alone. Commander Vex Tai leaned forward intently. What kind of maintenance does this prison require? Maya closed her eyes, accessing memories that Cosmos had shared with her. It's like, imagine the bad things are trapped inside a soap bubble, but the bubble keeps getting thinner. The Valorians used to strengthen it by singing special songs and thinking strong thoughts about protecting good things. Cosmos has been doing all the singing alone, but dragons need harmony to make their strongest magic. Dr. Kethera's compound eyes whirred as she processed the implications. The child is describing some form of psychic resonance field that requires multiple consciousness to maintain stability. If this prison is indeed containing threats to galactic security, we may be facing an imminent crisis. The conversation was interrupted by an emergency transmission from Galactic Council headquarters. Admiral Therex's stern visage filled the main display, flanked by representatives from every major species in known space. Dr. Chun, the Admiral began without preamble, by order of the Galactic Security Council, you are hereby directed to evacuate all personnel from the Vega Terminus system immediately. Military containment forces are en route to establish a secure perimeter around the Dragon entity. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Admiral, with respect, that would be extremely unwise. The creature has shown no hostile intentions, and, my daughter has established, your daughter, Admiral Therex interrupted, is 8 years old. The Galactic Council will not allow the security of trillions of beings to rest on the emotional attachment between a human child and an unknown xenomorphic entity of unprecedented destructive capability. Maya, who had been quietly listening to the exchange, suddenly stepped into the camera's field of view. Excuse me, Mr. Admiral, she said with the polite firmness her grandmother had taught her to use with difficult adults. I think you don't understand what's really happening here. The Admiral's reptilian features showed surprise at being addressed directly by the child who had become the center of galactic attention. Young human, this matter is, Cosmos isn't dangerous to good people, Maya continued, her voice carrying an odd harmonic that seemed to resonate through the communication system. But, if you try to hurt my friend, you'll make it very sad. And, when Cosmos is sad, the prison gets weaker. The bad things inside start pushing harder against the walls. Dr. Vexenael's crystalline form chimed with sudden alarm as she detected energy fluctuations in the transmission itself. Admiral, the child appears to be channeling some form of draconic influence through the communication array. Her voice patterns are matching the harmonic frequencies we've detected from the dragon entity. On the planet's surface, Maya had unconsciously established a connection with Cosmos even across the distance between the chamber and the research station. The dragon's consciousness touched hers, sharing concern about the approaching military forces and their potential impact on the cosmic prison's stability. Cosmos wants to show you something, Maya announced, her eyes reflecting starlight that shouldn't have been possible under artificial lighting. But, you have to promise not to hurt it while it's being vulnerable. The chamber's massive space suddenly filled with holographic projections that seemed to emerge from Cosmos itself. The images showed the galaxy as it truly existed, not just as a collection of stars and planets, but as a vast organism where consciousness and matter danced together in patterns of impossible complexity. At the galaxy's edge, the expedition team could see the prison that Cosmos guarded, a dimensional construct that contained horrors beyond description. Things that existed as pure entropy, beings that fed on the collapse of ordered systems, entities that sought to reduce all existence to uniform silence. The prison held them in stasis, but its walls flickered and wavered like candle flames in a hurricane. The Valorians understood, Maya said, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to echo from cosmic distances. They knew that some battles can't be won by fighting. Some enemies can only be stopped by making sure they stay asleep. The holographic display zoomed in on the prison structure, revealing the intricate patterns of psychic energy that maintained its integrity. Golden threads of consciousness wove together in harmonies that required multiple minds to sustain. For 10,000 years, Cosmos had been singing all the parts alone, but the strain was showing. Dark spots appeared in the weave where the dragon's exhausted mind could no longer maintain perfect resonance. Every time Cosmos feels threatened or afraid, Maya continued, the song gets discordant. The walls get thinner. The bad things get closer to waking up. Admiral Therex stared at the holographic display with growing horror. His military training had prepared him for conventional threats, invasions, weapons, territorial disputes. This was something entirely different, a responsibility that spanned geological time periods and required capabilities that no military force possessed. "Child," he said finally, his voice subdued, "what would happen if this prison failed entirely?" Maya's connection with Cosmos deepened as the dragon shared its most terrifying memories. Images flashed through the holographic display: galaxies reduced to cold ash, entire species consumed by entropy, the fundamental forces of physics unraveling as chaos spread like a cosmic virus. "Everything would end," she said simply. "Not just dying, but unmaking. Like if someone erased the universe and forgot to write it back." Chancellor Mordun leaned forward in his hoverchair. "And you believe this dragon can prevent such a catastrophe?" "Not alone," Maya replied. "Cosmos is tired and scared and lonely. The song is too big for one voice, even a dragon's voice. But if other people help." She paused, accessing deeper memories from her draconic friend. The Valorians weren't special because they were smart or strong. They were special because they cared about protecting good things more than they cared about being safe. Dr. Cathera's scientific mind raced through the implications. The child is suggesting that this song requires emotional resonance as much as psychic ability. The prison's strength depends on the collective will of conscious beings who actively choose to maintain cosmic order. "But why humans?" asked Dr. Vexanael. "Why would a dragon that has worked with advanced civilizations choose to bond with a species that has barely achieved interstellar travel?" Maya smiled, and, for a moment, she looked like any 8-year-old girl who had just figured out the answer to a particularly interesting puzzle. "Because humans are really good at being friends with things that are different from them. We make friends with animals and plants and even imaginary creatures in our stories. Most grown-up species think too much about whether friendship is logical." The truth of her words resonated through the communication channel with startling clarity. Humanity's greatest strength had always been their ability to form emotional bonds across species barriers. They kept pets, protected endangered animals, anthropomorphized everything from household objects to stellar phenomena. Where other species saw cosmic threats requiring military solutions, humans instinctively looked for ways to establish personal connections. Admiral Durex felt his certainty crumbling as he realized the magnitude of what they were confronting. The approaching fleet represented the greatest military force ever assembled, but all their weapons and strategies were worse than useless against a threat that could only be countered through friendship and emotional courage. "Stand down the containment fleet," he ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of a decision that would reshape galactic politics. "Redirect them to defensive positions. We're going to try something that has never been attempted in the history of the Galactic Council." Maya clapped her hands with delight. "Are you going to come meet Cosmos? It would like that very much. Dragons love making new friends, especially ones who want to help protect good things." As the Admiral began issuing new orders that would fundamentally change how the galaxy understood both dragons and the nature of cosmic threats, Maya felt Cosmos' joy resonating through their mental connection. The ancient guardian was no longer alone in its vigil. But, in the dark spaces between galaxies, something vast and hungry stirred as it sensed the prison walls fluctuating with new possibilities. The game between order and chaos was about to enter a new phase, with an 8-year-old girl and her dragon friend standing at the center of cosmic forces that could reshape the very nature of existence. The arrival of the Galactic Council's diplomatic mission created unprecedented chaos at the small research station. Ships from every major civilization converged on the Vega Terminus system, massive Andromedan city ships that housed millions of beings, crystalline Zolonian vessels that sang through vacuum with harmonic resonances, Praxian bioships that pulsed like living organs through space, and sleek human exploration craft that darted between the larger vessels like minnows among whales. Maya watched the growing fleet through the station's observation deck with fascination rather than fear. Each ship represented a different species with unique perspectives on the universe, and she found their diversity beautiful rather than threatening. Cosmos had shared memories of other such gatherings from ancient times, when multiple civilizations worked together on projects that spanned centuries and transformed entire star systems. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Sarah Chen murmured, standing beside her daughter as they observed the diplomatic chaos unfolding around them. "The entire galaxy is watching what happens here." "Cosmos is excited," Maya replied, her eyes reflecting starlight that seemed to come from within. "It hasn't talked to this many different people since the Valorians were still alive. Dragons love big conversations about important things." The diplomatic sessions began with traditional formal ceremonies that quickly dissolved into heated debates about the nature of cosmic threats, the reliability of information from non-sentient sources, and the wisdom of allowing interspecies relations to depend on the emotional bond between a human child and an ancient entity of unknown motivation. Ambassador Tvell of the Rigelian Consortium argued for immediate containment protocols. We cannot ignore the potential threat represented by a being of such immense power. History provides numerous examples of supposedly benevolent entities that later proved hostile to organized civilization. Chancellor Mordun countered with economic pragmatism. The costs of maintaining military containment for an indefinite period would strain the resources of every member civilization. We must consider diplomatic alternatives. Dr. Vex Nal presented the scientific perspective with her characteristic crystalline chiming. Our analysis suggests that this entity, regardless of its intentions toward us, serves as a critical component in maintaining galactic stability. Hostile action against it could trigger consequences that exceed our ability to contain or repair. Through all the debate, Maya remained the only person who had actually communicated with Cosmos in depth. The diplomat spoke about the dragon as if it were an abstract problem to be solved rather than a conscious being with its own thoughts, feelings, and cosmic responsibilities. Admiral the Rex, whose military perspective had evolved considerably since learning about the prison's true nature, finally called for direct consultation with the dragon itself. We're debating the intentions and capabilities of a being that's demonstrably intelligent and communicative. Perhaps we should ask it directly what it wants. The suggestion triggered a new round of debates about proper xenodiplomacy protocols, the risks of direct neural contact with unknown entities, and the qualifications needed to serve as translator for communications that could determine galactic fate. Maya listened to these discussions with growing impatience that reflected her draconic friend's own frustration. Cosmos wants to talk to everyone, she announced during a particularly heated exchange about communication safety protocols. But it doesn't understand why you're all so scared of making friends. Dragons think friendship is the most powerful force in the universe. Ambassador Tvell's reptilian features showed skepticism. Child, you cannot base interspecies diplomacy on emotional constructs that lack scientific foundation. Friendship is a biochemical response pattern that varies significantly between species. Maya tilted her head in a gesture that looked oddly draconic. Cosmos says you're thinking about friendship wrong. It's not just feelings in your brain, it's a way of connecting consciousness across different kinds of existence. That's how the prison works. The Valorians didn't maintain it with technology, they maintained it by caring about protecting things they loved. Dr. Kathera's compound eyes whirred as she processed the implications of Maya's words. The child may be describing a form of quantum consciousness entanglement. If emotional bonds can create measurable effects at the subatomic level, then friendship becomes a legitimate physical force rather than merely a psychological construct. The debate was interrupted by urgent alarms throughout the station. Long-range sensors detected massive energy fluctuations from the deep space regions beyond the galactic rim, the same areas where Cosmos had shown them the cosmic prison in its holographic displays. Dr. Martinez, the expedition's chief engineer, studied the incoming data with growing alarm. We're detecting gravitational waves that shouldn't be possible. Something enormous is moving in the space between galaxies, and it's heading this way. On the planet's surface, Cosmos raised its massive head from the chamber floor as ancient senses detected disturbances in the cosmic order. The dragon's mental connection with Maya intensified, sharing visions of things stirring in the dark that had slumbered since the last galactic cycle. The bad things are waking up, Maya announced to the assembled diplomats, her voice carrying harmonics that made the station's metal walls vibrate sympathetically. They felt the prison getting weaker when everyone was arguing about whether to trust Cosmos. Now they're testing the barriers. The holographic displays around the chamber activated without technological assistance, powered by Cosmos's own energy as it shared real-time visions of the cosmic prison. The diplomatic mission watched in horror as dark shapes pressed against barriers of crystallized starlight, seeking weak points where entropy could begin its work of unmaking ordered reality. Estimated time until barrier failure? Admiral the Rex demanded, his military training overriding diplomatic protocols in the face of imminent threat. Maya closed her eyes, accessing Cosmos's ancient wisdom about the prison's construction and maintenance cycles. If the bad things keep pushing this hard, maybe 3 days. Maybe less if they figure out how to work together better. Chancellor Mordun's hoverchair drifted closer to Maya as the magnitude of their situation became clear. Child, what would be required to strengthen these barriers? What did the Valorians do that kept this prison stable for millennia? They sang together, Maya replied simply. Not just with their voices, but with their hearts and minds and souls. They made music out of wanting to protect good things. Cosmos can teach the song, but it needs other voices to make it strong enough. Dr. Vexenal's crystalline form chimed with sudden understanding. The dragon requires a choir of conscious beings who can harmonize at both psychic and emotional frequencies. But such a choir would need to maintain perfect synchronization across interstellar distances for an indefinite period. The Valorians managed it, Maya pointed out with 8-year-old logic. And they didn't have all the fancy technology you have now. They just cared enough about their friends to make it work. Ambassador Twell struggled with concepts that challenged his species' fundamentally individualistic worldview. You're describing a form of collective consciousness that would require unprecedented cooperation between species that have competed for resources across millennia. The political implications, Admiral the Rex interrupted grimly, become irrelevant if those barriers fail and everything we know ceases to exist. Maya felt Cosmos's attention focusing on the various alien diplomats as the dragon evaluated their potential for the kind of consciousness harmonization required to maintain the cosmic prison. Each species brought different strengths and limitations to the challenge of creating a galactic choir capable of singing entropy into dormancy. Humans possessed emotional flexibility and a natural tendency toward empathetic connection across species barriers. Their relatively young civilization hadn't developed the rigid thought patterns that sometimes limited older species, but they lacked the deep cosmic awareness that came from millennia of stellar observation. The Thraxians' compound mental structures could process multiple harmonic layers simultaneously, but their hive mind tendencies made individual initiative difficult. The crystalline Andromedans could maintain perfect pitch across vast distances, but their logical nature resisted the emotional resonance required for the strongest protective barriers. Each species had evolved specific capabilities that could contribute to a cosmic defense, but none possessed all the qualities needed to maintain the prison alone. The solution required true cooperation rather than mere alliance, a merger of consciousness that transcended political boundaries and cultural differences. Cosmos wants to try teaching the song to everyone, Maya announced. But it's scared that some people might not be ready for the kind of connection it requires. When you sing the protection song, you have to open your mind completely. You can't keep secrets or hold back parts of yourself. The diplomatic implications were staggering. The dragon was essentially requesting that representatives of every major galactic civilization undergo deep psychic merging with an entity they'd known about for less than a week. The vulnerability such a connection would create made traditional diplomatic protocols impossible. Dr. Kethara stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. I volunteer to attempt initial contact. My species has experience with consciousness-sharing rituals, and someone needs to verify the child's claims about the dragon's teachings. Absolutely not, Admiral the Rex objected. We need more data before risking personnel in uncontrolled xenopsychic experiments. Admiral, Maya interjected with the patient tone she used when explaining obvious things to adults, while you're worrying about being safe, the bad things are getting stronger. Every minute you wait makes the prison weaker and the song harder to learn. As if to emphasize her point, the station's hull groaned under gravitational stresses as space itself began warping around regions where the cosmic barriers showed signs of strain. Emergency systems activated throughout the diplomatic fleet as reality itself became unstable in the vicinity of the failing prison. Cosmos's mental voice touched Maya's consciousness with desperate urgency. The dragon had maintained its lonely vigil for 10 millennia, but the approaching crisis exceeded even its vast capabilities. Without help from multiple conscious beings willing to share the burden of cosmic protection, the barriers would fail within hours rather than days. We're out of time for debates, Maya announced, standing with sudden authority that seemed far beyond her 8 years. Cosmos is sharing the song with me right now. Anyone who wants to help save everything had better listen carefully. Her voice began to change, taking on harmonics that resonated with frequencies beyond normal human perception. The sound carried through the station's communication systems and reached every ship in the assembled fleet, touching the consciousness of every being who heard it with the ancient melody that had held chaos at bay for 10,000 years. The cosmic prison's barriers flared with renewed strength as Maya became the first voice in a new galactic choir, but the song she sang alone couldn't match the power of the Valerian chorus that had originally created the protective harmony. She needed other voices to join her, consciousness willing to merge with hers and Cosmos's in defense of everything they held dear. The greatest test of galactic civilization was about to begin, with a human child and an ancient dragon leading a symphony that would determine whether order or chaos ruled the universe. The cosmic song that poured through Maya's small voice carried power that defied physical laws. Reality itself responded to the ancient melody as spacetime rippled with harmonics that touched the fundamental forces holding the universe together. Throughout the assembled fleet, beings of every species felt the song penetrating their consciousness, awakening genetic memories of cosmic connection that had slumbered for millennia. Dr. Kethara was the first to answer Maya's call. The Thraxian scientist's compound mind naturally resonated with multiple harmonic layers, allowing her to join the melody with intricate counterpoints that strengthened the overall composition. Her voice, transmitted through bioelectrical patterns rather than sound waves, wove itself into Maya's human tones and Cosmos's draconic harmonics. Admiral the Rex felt the song pulling at his consciousness despite every military instinct that warned against lowering his mental defenses. The melody carried emotional frequencies that bypassed rational thought, speaking directly to the deep protective instincts that had originally driven him to military service. With a warrior's courage, he allowed his mind to open and added his voice to the growing chorus. One by one, beings throughout the fleet began joining the cosmic choir. Each species contributed unique harmonic qualities that enriched the overall song, crystalline Andromedans providing perfect pitch stability, gaseous Betelgeusians adding flowing melodic transitions, silicon-based Rigelians contributing rhythmic foundations that resonated with planetary frequencies. Maya felt her consciousness expanding as each new voice joined the chorus. Through the psychic connections established by the song, she experienced existence from dozens of different perspectives simultaneously. She saw the universe through compound eyes that perceived probability clouds, felt stellar radiation as intimate warmth through photosynthetic skin, processed quantum fluctuations as emotional currents through crystalline neural networks. The diversity of galactic consciousness created a choir of unprecedented complexity. Where the ancient Valorians had achieved harmony through cultural unity, this new chorus drew strength from cognitive diversity. Each species' unique way of perceiving reality added new dimensions to the protective song that Cosmos had never experienced before. In the deep chamber beneath the planet's surface, the ancient dragon felt joy that transcended even its vast emotional range. For the first time in 10,000 years, the burden of cosmic guardianship was shared rather than endured in isolation. The song flowing through the galactic choir carried not just protective power, but the love and determination of trillions of beings who chose to defend existence itself rather than retreat into self-preservation. The cosmic prison responded to the renewed song with cascading waves of reinforcement. Barriers that had flickered on the edge of failure blazed with renewed strength as conscious will transformed into fundamental force. The entities of pure entropy pressed against the strengthened walls with increasing desperation, but their chaos could not penetrate defenses woven from harmony and hope. Maya served as the focal point for the galactic chorus, her human consciousness somehow capable of integrating the disparate mental patterns of species that had evolved under different stars and dimensional conditions. Her 8-year-old mind approached the impossible task with the fearless creativity that adults lost when they learned too much about limitations and boundaries. "It's working," she announced through channels that carried her voice simultaneously to every ship in the fleet. "The bad things are getting farther away from the walls. They don't like it when we all sing together." But, even as the immediate crisis passed, Maya felt Cosmos sharing deeper concerns about the long-term nature of their cosmic responsibility. The prison required constant maintenance across geological time periods, not just emergency reinforcement during crisis moments. The galactic choir would need to maintain their connection indefinitely if they hoped to prevent future breakouts. Dr. Vexenal's crystalline form resonated with harmonic frequencies as she analyzed the chorus's structure through scientific instruments that had never been designed to measure consciousness itself. The child appears to be serving as a neural nexus for the entire network. Her brain patterns are synchronizing input from hundreds of different cognitive architectures simultaneously. Chancellor Mordun felt economic implications rippling through his merchant's consciousness as he participated in the song. Maintaining a galactic choir would require unprecedented cooperation between species that had competed for resources throughout recorded history. Trade relationships, territorial boundaries, even basic concepts of individual versus collective identity would need fundamental revision. "This changes everything," he transmitted through the psychic network that the song had created between all participants. "We cannot return to isolation and competition after experiencing unity at this level." Ambassador Twell struggled with philosophical implications that challenged his species' core beliefs about consciousness and identity. The song required participants to lower mental barriers that had evolved as survival mechanisms, creating vulnerability that traditional diplomacy considered unacceptable. Yet the alternative was universal annihilation. The security implications, he transmitted reluctantly, will require new frameworks for interspecies interaction. How can we maintain necessary boundaries while preserving the connections needed for cosmic defense? Maya felt Cosmos' ancient wisdom flowing through their connection as the dragon shared solutions developed during its partnership with the Valorians. The consciousness choir didn't require constant active participation from every member, rather, it needed a network of trained singers who could activate when threats emerged, plus a core group of dedicated guardians who maintained basic harmonies during peaceful periods. "We need dragon riders," Maya announced, translating Cosmos' concepts into terms her human perspective could understand. Not people who ride on dragons' backs, but people who join with dragon consciousness to share the watching and singing. The Valorians had special schools where children learned the deep songs. The implications sparked intense debate throughout the choir network. Establishing permanent psychic bonds between galactic species would create a new form of civilization that transcended traditional concepts of individual identity and cultural separation. Children would grow up experiencing reality through multiple species' perspectives, developing cognitive abilities that their parents could barely comprehend. Dr. Sarah Chen felt maternal pride and terror warring in her consciousness as she realized her daughter was proposing to become the first graduate of such a program. Maya had already demonstrated capabilities that exceeded adult understanding, but committing to permanent partnership with an ancient cosmic entity represented a choice that would define not just her individual future, but the evolutionary direction of human consciousness itself. "Maya," she transmitted through the song network, "are you sure this is what you want? You could have a normal childhood, normal human relationships, normal limitations that keep you safe." "Mom," Maya replied with the patient wisdom that her connection with Cosmos had accelerated beyond her chronological age, "normal isn't protecting people from monsters that want to unmake everything good. Besides, I like being friends with Cosmos. Dragons are much more interesting than normal." Throughout the fleet, parents from dozens of species faced similar decisions as they realized the cosmic choir would need to include their children if it hoped to develop the capabilities required for long-term cosmic defense. The song network carried emotional resonances of love, fear, pride, and determination as beings who had never met in physical space shared the most intimate aspects of consciousness. The entities in the cosmic prison made one final attempt to break free, pressing against the barriers with combined force that would have shattered the previous defenses. But the Galactic Choir's song had evolved beyond simple protective harmony into something qualitatively different, a celebration of conscious cooperation that transformed defensive necessity into creative joy. The attack failed completely, entropy recoiling from barriers that had become celebrations of everything that chaos sought to destroy. Order and duty, love and friendship, hope and determination wove themselves into cosmic forces that entropy could not touch without being transformed by contact. Maya felt the immediate threat fade into distant background noise as the cosmic prison stabilized at strength levels that exceeded even the Valerian achievements. But, more than that, she sensed new possibilities emerging from the connections established between previously isolated species. "Cosmos wants to show you something beautiful," she announced to the choir network. "Something the Valorians built when they weren't busy fighting bad things." The dragon's memories flowed through the network, sharing visions of what galactic civilization could become when species learned to blend their unique capabilities rather than compete for dominance. Cities that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, artworks that required centuries to complete and could only be appreciated through combined species perspectives, scientific discoveries that emerged from cognitive fusion between radically different ways of processing reality. Dr. Kethara felt her scientific worldview expanding to accommodate possibilities that transcended individual species' limitations. "We're witnessing the birth of a new form of consciousness," she transmitted with awe. "Not just cooperation between separate entities, but true cognitive fusion that creates capabilities exceeding the sum of individual parts." Admiral the Rex experienced strategic implications that redefined military thinking entirely. Traditional concepts of defense based on territorial boundaries and resource competition became obsolete when consciousness itself could merge across species barriers. The greatest threats to galactic security would come not from invasion or conquest, but from entities that sought to disrupt the cooperative networks that made cosmic defense possible. As the cosmic song settled into rhythms that could be maintained across centuries, Maya felt herself becoming something new, still human, but enhanced by connection to consciousness that spanned galactic distances and geological time periods. She remained 8 years old in some ways, delighted by the simple pleasure of friendship with a cosmic dragon. But, in other ways, she had become the first member of a new form of consciousness that would guide galactic civilization into futures that individual species could never achieve alone. The research station Prometheus, which had begun this adventure as a simple archaeological mission, now served as the headquarters for the greatest transformation in galactic history. Maya and Cosmos had accomplished something that military force, diplomatic negotiations, and economic incentives had never achieved. They had convinced the galaxy's diverse species that their greatest strength lay not in competition, but in friendship. In the deep chamber where their partnership began, Maya sat beside Cosmos's massive head as starlight flowed between them. The dragon's contentment resonated through the galactic network, sharing the simple joy of no longer being alone with consciousness that could appreciate the magnitude of their cosmic responsibility. "Thank you," Cosmos transmitted to the network of minds that now shared its eternal vigil. "For 10,000 years, I have sung alone in the darkness. Now we sing together in the light of all our worlds." Maya smiled and began braiding flowers from her mother's botanical samples into the warm scales near the dragon's eye. Some friendships, she reflected, were worth saving the entire universe to protect. The cosmic prison held firm, defended not by force or fear, but by the simple truth that friendship was indeed the most powerful force in the universe, especially when that friendship extended across every conscious species willing to join the song.